Welcome, Walnut. I'm Lara, but you can call me Laz, your host for Walnut Wednesday. This is your reminder to be brave, be yourself, and know that you can make the world a better place just by what you decide today. Here, I'm going to share my weekly walnuttings with you on a Wednesday. Hi, Walnut. It is me, Laz, here, your host. Welcome to another episode of Walnut Wednesday. And today we have a returning guest, the most beautiful, delicious, angelic, wonderful banana, the best conversations ever. Welcome, Kate Bromley.
Hi.
Hi. So, Walnut, if you are new here, Kate is my best friend, and we have her on every 10-ish episodes. And basically, you are privy to fly on the wall conversations as they sort of happen, of how we sort of actually do chat in real life. A little bit more curated, but right, Kate, pretty fly on the wall conversation. So, Kate, I'll just get you to introduce yourself and tell us, and if there's a new walnut here, a little bit about yourself, and then we can hop into today's topic.
Sure. I'm Kate. I'm Lara's best friend. We go way back to uni. I live in London at the moment, and I'm a freelance film producer and sometimes director. And we just like to talk about a lot of shit, basically.
Basically, yes. So, funny side story, Walnut, is Kate and I were trying to find of what we wanted to talk about this week, and our chat is just full of voice notes of us literally rambling. Like we just spent what's the time? Yeah, we spent a good I want to say 10 to 15 minutes searching through our voice notes of what we talk about almost daily, to try and find the theme. We didn't quite land, but we got something. So what we want to talk about this week, Walnut, is a little bit, it started along the train of micromanagement and managing the expectations of other people. But basically it started, Walnut, where I've sort of come to a place where past Laz used to actually be quite a micromanager in my old job, and I used to feel like I was quite uptight and over organized, and I used to get really stressed out that everything would sort of fall on me to be the organizer. But the result of that was that I ended up being very, very micromanagey, and I just wanted to sort of start on this topic train, especially with you, Kate, because I've come to a place where I've sort of started to realize that the moment that you let that kind of energy go, which took me a really, really long time, you kind of start to build not only a trust in yourself that everything will be okay, but a trust in others to either surprise you or support you, rather than just think everyone's going to always disappoint you and that you have to do all the things all the time. Would that be a correct theme line that we were going to talk about, Kate?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, so much, but I guess where do you want to begin?
Yeah, I guess. Do you have any experiences, Kate, from particularly your role as well, where the micromanaging has impacted you in some way?
I think yes. I mean, I tend to be really sensitive to it myself. Like if I feel like I'm being micromanaged, and I usually then try to think, this is probably not personal to me. It's probably about them feeling like they need information to feel secure or to whatever. But in terms of me micromanaging, I feel like my role is in management. I mean, literally production, like our fingers on the button for everything. And it doesn't happen without it going through us and organizing it and telling everyone what they need to know and being, the conduit. But how do you do that without then, well, if it's even up to me, what can happen is then people decide, I don't have to think for myself at all. And then they can actually just think you're a little bit at their beck and call. So I'll put, documents together, for example, and that purpose of that document, my role is to make sure if they read that, everything they could possibly know is there. Or if it's not there, then they'll know who to contact. And then they don't read it. And then they
Mm,
just ask me things. And so in a way for me with work, it's sort of like, well, how do I toe the line between being the person with the answers, but not their mom, you know? Because when
yeah.
you were describing that sort of doing everything and feeling like you get nothing, I thought, oh my God, that's like the thankless role of being a mother, except it's not okay when they're not children who don't know better. It's really frustrating when they're grown-ups.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think it's really common. I think, certain people take certain roles in friendship groups or in relationships. Speaking with some friends, and they said, like, genuinely everyone who needs to organize anything to see this person goes through their partner, because the woman in the relationship organized everything. And I was like appalled, like morally appalled. And then my job is actually that as well. It's just that I've got a million partners by the sounds of it. And I guess it's, to round up, it's sort of like, well, you've got to ask for something different, or put boundaries up if you don't want to end up in that role. Like, you can be an organizer in the elements you want to be an organizer, without then being like,
The one.
the beholden to answering every little question. So, whether that's someone saying, like, I left something, someone being like, oh, do you have so-and-so's number? And I thought, if I don't reply, they'll figure it out that I've given it to them in the document and they should check there. But if I
Mm.
just send it to them, you know, like, I mean, that's a little petty, but genuinely, I just sent them all the information. I was like, let's just see if they'll work it out. Like, I'm not going to stress about sending them a number in a different way to what I've already done. And maybe that's just like some of my coping mechanisms for being like, no, that's my boundary. I'm going to pretend I haven't seen that, and they can just fucking work it out.
No, I hear what you're saying as well, and that's where that's like the kind of, it's reminding me of the difference between like teaching and coaching, where the coaching is sort of like, I mean, different, it's slightly different context here, but like the coaching is leading people to find their own, you know what the answer is in your head, but leading others to find it themselves so that they can enable themselves, be capable of it themselves. Whereas the teaching is like, here's the number, here's the information, do what you will with it. And it's sort of reminding me of that. And I feel like it's all really tying into that people pleasing thing, because as a person who has been in that role in almost every single facet of my life, it's very strange to you mentioned a word before and I forgot what it was now. I didn't write it down, but it's that feeling of like saying what you actually need. I remember a story where I just happened to be the default camp mum for a lot of things, and I remember one time Geordie was like, we're talking about organizing everything. I was like, I don't want to do this, and he was like, yeah, but you like doing it. And I was like, well, actually, I just do it. I don't necessarily like doing it. I'm good at it, but not, and so it led to this like really good conversation where now it's like understood that it's like, I'm not the one because I like doing it. I'm the one because it just kind of happens that way. And now it's a bit more because we were sort of brave enough to, one, for me to even say that, and for also the receptive listening on the other end of that, there is now an equal ground of equal-ish organizing that part takes, and it's up to me actually to stop this like controlling micromanagey tendencies that do come up when I start to get overwhelmed. It's like my default state where when I'm under pressure or under stress, that's when I whip out the lists. That's when I like start to think of tomorrow and the next day and and I get a little bit like ants in my pants about it all. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that funny story. I can't remember where I was going with that, but yeah.
No, I think it's interesting, because I think what you've tapped into is that, like, that idea of, well, we become that, and people just assume, well, that's what you want to do, because like it inherently becomes our own burden that we've made, like a rod for our own back. I think is that thing of being like, for me, before a shoot or something, I could barely sleep, because it's just like anything goes wrong and I'm like, oh, how am I going to solve it? And most of the times, the scenarios in my head of things that would go wrong, or if some person forgets a piece of kit, or someone doesn't bring their ID, or
Yeah.
XYZ. And like 9 times out of 10, something's going to happen and it will get sorted. But also, it's kind of like being like, people make mistakes, that I can make mistakes, like that it happens. And I think what happens when you're like constantly trying to like make sure everyone else is fine is there's nothing left for you at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
no, and given no space, sometimes I've found this where it's never even occurred to anyone to ask me if I need help at that point, because it's so like, you know, I was full on, it's manic, you know. I remember I've got a couple of things. One, I was thinking about my mom who organized everyone all the time, and that thing of like thinking and believing that everything would go wrong if she didn't organize it. And I swear, I think one time she was so stressed or so focused on making sure everyone else was sorted for a trip that when we finally got to the place, she'd forgotten to pack herself any underwear. Sorry, mom, calling you out.
Oh, love you, Mama Broms. We've all been there.
Yeah, yeah. And it was like a great example, because it was like she left no space to worry about herself. And therefore, people don't think of it necessarily either. Or you're really surprised when someone goes, well, you could just ask for help. Or like, do you need anything? Or, hey, would you like a coffee? You seem stressed out. And you're like, yes, thank you.
You like
And it's
crying, yeah, that someone
yeah.
thought of you, yeah.
And it is a bit of a martyrdom to the point. Like, I
Yeah,
picked a job that is to organize, and I do my job. And if people don't read it, that's on them. And I've had, as things have gone on and I've decided not to eat shit for everyone else's mistakes, there have been some moments, I think we've talked about it previously on a podcast, where I've had some clashes with people where they're like, well, oh, I didn't know about this. And I'm like, well, did you read the documents? Because they're all on there, basically that's a you problem. And also, I think the bigger step I've had is like, if I'm doing this in my job, and other people might have it in different ways, is learning to ask for what you need in other areas. So like, a friend of mine was like, we should do something for your birthday. What do you want to do? What are you interested in? And I just said to her, I was like, I love that you want to do something for my birthday. The best thing you could possibly do for me is just not ask me any questions. So I'll be happy with anything. Please don't make me even think about food, venue, time, location. Don't care. I will
yeah,
be happy to see you, and the gift will be not planning. And she's like, got you. And she's on it, because if we tell people what we need, and good people will understand, and they will give us those things. And if they don't, then again, like we come back to, is they're probably not great people to be around. Some of it's
yeah.
unavoidable because of work, but then you can just put boundaries up even if you can't, you know, get out of the situation. But it is on us, micromanagers, control freaks. It's on us to like loosen the reins a bit, and that can be super hard because there's a lot of fear there, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's like there's a step one, which is loosening the reins like on yourself and giving yourself that grace. But then I think there is like a part of us, Walnut, that a part of us who are the micromanager, control freak kind of walnuts, to notice it in other ones and ask, once we've kind of managed it on our own, is then ask the questions, be the person that goes, do you want a coffee? To the other, notice our own kind a little bit, and like share that sort of grace around, like that pay it forward kind of thing. When you were talking, Kate, I was remembering very fondly how recently was like the best birthday gift I could have ever possibly had, where my birthday wasn't back in December, but Geordie had pre-booked me us an Airbnb out in the forest. I didn't have to organize anything. Like, it sounds pretty simple that your partner just booked a little holiday for you, but like, this was the best gift I could have ever had in my recent present. Like, it was exactly what I wanted. I didn't have to drive anywhere. I didn't have to like buy anything extra. It was literally just pack my bags, show up, sit in the passenger seat, and then we went. And it was such a nice, relaxing weekend. We had no agenda. We had no plans. I think, we had one booking for lunch, and it was honestly the most rejuvenation I have felt, Walnut, in a very, very long time. And that was all just because of a few clicks of a button that I could have easily done myself, or like researching a lunch venue that I could have done myself. But like having someone else do that for me, like honestly just meant the world. So that's what I'm kind of meaning about noticing in our own kind, our other micromanagers, how much a small, simple step of clicking a few buttons, albeit we do it for others all the time that are not control freaks, but there's that balance of sort of noticing it within each other, right? I also wanted to touch on a little bit, Kate, the word before that I had forgotten was how you said it feels kind of thankless. And it's funny that you brought that up, because when I've been sort of questioned at work in a group setting about my role, I have actually, when I walnutted one to talk in front of a group of like people who are like in the hierarchy a lot higher than me, sort of thing. But also to say that sometimes I do feel like my role is quite thankless, and I am the person in a work context who will, bless your mama Brom's kind of like that, but in a work setting of like, I will bring the laptop chargers because 9 times out of 10, there are 2 people who always forget their charger. I will print out the documents because people forget their laptops and don't look at the agenda. I do all of these things. I think about catering. I think about all of this other stuff. And then when it gets to what I need, I'm like, oh, hang on, I actually haven't had a break all day. And when you go on your lunch break, I check on my own stuff. And so, yeah, that word thankless really kind of triggered me, because it's like, yeah, you just want the person to, you just want to be noticed, and you just want to have someone think of you in that way. And that's what kind of brought up the memory of like the birthday gift that I just received, because sometimes, yeah, you just want to be seen, I suppose. Would you agree, Kate?
Yeah, and I think that's why, you know, sometimes you're not going to get it from the people that receive from you, especially
Yeah,
with work stuff. They're just, I mean, that's the point, right? Sometimes it's like, well, you're a blip on their radar, or they've got their own stuff going on, or it's just, it's not necessarily reasonable to expect it from everyone. But you can expect that there are people who you choose to have in your life, friends, you know, family, partners, and things that should know that for you. So if you come back from a thankless day, right, having a partner who goes, tell me about it, and they listen and let you vent all your stuff out, and then they're sympathetic to you, you know, you're being heard, you're being seen, you're releasing that. Or for me, like I had I've talked about before, like my short documentary shoot, which I was like, there was a lot going on for that, and I genuinely had to put everything for me on the back burner, because I really had to like look after people, and that's where I'm proud that I can do that, and I am happy to do it. And it certainly wasn't thankless, but it took a lot out of me, which meant I had to also be my own protector later, which was like, all right, everyone's been taken care of, everyone's at home, we accomplished the thing. Now I'm going to really take care of myself now, because I'm not just a machine, and I'm not just a giver, and I get to like sleep for 3 days without guilt, to be like, you're replenishing because, you know, you get to be selfish now because you've been selfless long enough. So yeah, I think that's the thing, like, is when I have been full on and a friend mentions my birthday and I say, I'd really like you to just organize something for me, and she goes, on it, that's being seen. And you cannot expect people to read your mind about it. You really
exactly.
can't. And so if you never ask, you know, you don't have to ask because you're at your wit's end and you're like, oh, for God's sake, if someone would just think of me for what, you know, that real classic, I've burnt out, no one's read my mind, I'm angry and I don't know why, so I'm going to take it out on the world. It's like, it's like, you know, it'd be really nice actually if I'm not going to complain. I'm not bothered about what we do. I'm bothered about the idea of like planning. So I'm super happy to go on whatever ride. If it means I don't have to think about it, I can sit back and relax. And someone's like, I hear you. And they deliver that for you. And they do it because they want to make you happy, you know? And it's really, I think when you look for that, when you ask for that and you receive it, it balances out the world a lot more, and you realize, do I need to be on that sort of mindset of control, of planning, of micromanaging, of, well, if I don't do it, no one will, or if I don't do it, everything's going to go wrong. Do I need to be on that level all the time? Or can
Yeah.
I just take a little breath and assess the situation and think, actually, I don't need to organize this one. I'm pretty relaxed about what we do. This person has very clear ideas. They can take the reins. That's great. Great for them. Happy to go along with it.
It gives you that, like, also that perspective, like, when you get a bit overwhelmed and stressed and it snowballs in your head, it makes you kind of like, when you kind of list it all out, it's like, oh, actually I wasn't really doing, like, it feels like that much because you're getting stressed and bogged down by it, but it's not actually that much when you start not expecting but suggesting that someone else can do it for you. And this is a whole other end of this topic about feeling bad about it. But one thing that I've started sort of doing in particular group situations, like I'm talking group chat organizing situations, is really taking a step back on being the person that books the dinner or suggests the things. And I kind of, it at first was really uncomfortable because I thought nothing would happen. But then I thought, well, what would happen if I just sort of left it? And lo and behold, there was a venue, there was a table booked, it all kind of gets sorted out. But having that prior micromanaging knowledge, I suppose, I did really make sure that I thanked the person that booked it when they were asking for options. I sort of really made sure to, like, have constructive answers, like, I like this one best, but that one if it's booked, or something like that, rather than just a statement that is not helpful, which from experience I sort of know. So yeah, that's what that sort of reminded me of, as
It's
part of that.
freeing, isn't it?
Mm.
It's really freeing, and it can be really you realize that you really shouldn't be organizing things or taking control of things out of that sort of resentful place, which can be a pattern we don't even realize, which is, well, yeah, I have to, don't I? Because if I
Yeah, there
don't,
is.
nothing's going to happen. And it's
Mm.
like, well, then should you be doing it at all if that's how it feels? Like, I mean, going back to my mama's example, like we had an incredible trip last year for her 60th. And basically we were like, where do you want to go? We agreed it was going to be North America, and she picked Miami, which just PS coolest choice for a 60-year-old to pick. And like we were like, hey, cool, what do you want to do? Like we asked about like what she was interested in, and basically just planned it. Some of it we planned while we were there, some of it my sister planned and scoped out things, some of it I planned, or like it was just I'm realizing that now, is like she trusted us enough, and like, or
Yeah.
has, adjusted in life and realized I can like loosen the reins, and like had the best time. And sometimes, things didn't always go to plan. I mean, it's traveling, right? And sometimes we had to like do things on a different day or whatever. I mean, not tons. Some things were just spontaneous that we never even thought, like having lunch at Versace's mansion. Awesome. That was like
Mm.
basically a plan on the day. My sister found it and we booked it and we had a great time. And that's the thing, is actually knowing what you have to organize, enjoying those moments, and then leaving space for spontaneity and like going with the flow. And like, it's really rewarding. And it means when you do have to just, sometimes we just have to buckle down and get stuff sorted, and you are dealing with some people that maybe you wish you weren't. I'm thinking more like often it's a work scenarios, or sometimes even just that group mentality with friends. It's no one specific, it's just a vibe where you're like, right, this is gonna be hard work.
Yeah.
You have to decide, like, does that mean enough to me to do the hard work, or am I doing this out of a sort of almost like to prove something, like, or
Yeah.
a little bit, it's a little bit toxic, really,
It
of
goes to that martyrdom word that you mentioned earlier, right? You think that you hold this weird standard of yourself, but it's not in like an egotistical way, but it also is very much at the same time. Sorry, continue your toxicity train of thought there.
no, that's exactly, you took the words out of my mouth. You're totally right. And it's sort of like, I feel like it's maybe it's weaved into this sort of unhealthy value system for ourselves. Like, well, what good am I to the group or to the XYZ if I don't put my hand up first for everything and say, I'll do it, or say yes to anything asked of me. And that's sort of indicative of fairly like a low standard of what you think of people think of you, you know? It's like, oh, well, if I don't offer any value, if I'm not sorting everything out and orchestrating it, no one's gonna be happy with me, or people are gonna be let down by me, then what do you think of your friends then, or your family or
Mm.
people? Like, if you chill out and you sit back and you see other people are like more than happy to do lovely things for you, or to check in on you, or ask you what you want and sort it out, like, how much nicer is that a way to view your friends and family around you, and to realize what you mean to them, and that your value is just to exist and to be equal in it all and to be balanced. And I mean, I'm speaking from personal experiences. Like, I definitely know that a lot of my organizing and trying to like make everything great for everyone else was due to low self-esteem, because it was like, I don't really care. It doesn't matter what I want. It's just the anxiety about anyone else not being happy with the place I picked, or, the activity I wanted to do. And I've stopped doing that. And you know what? Everyone still has a great time. And if
Yeah.
they don't tell me, which is great too.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
And I have a
it's
great
also
time.
that reality check as well, that the person who booked the table is not at fault if the meal was 30 minutes delayed, or if you got steak instead of chicken, or like it does really really tie into this worthiness, the people pleasing conversation, also like just the empathetic conversation of like reading a room and trying to like subconsciously somehow make sure that everyone in the room feels okay before yourself. Like, it's tied into funny, I never would have put micromanaging and people pleasing in the same sort of bucket, but here it is. I love that. I wanted to know, Kate, I have an example that I want to sort of share. I think I have said it on a podcast episode before, but I would love your advice. And this was, back in recovering people pleasing era, where I still was, making moves that have room for improvement and opportunity. But we were away on a sort of friend's holiday, and I actually was already feeling really overwhelmed and burnt out and things like that. And I actually had put myself to bed a lot earlier, as if to say, like, I'm done. We made it here. This is all organized, but I'm going Betty Buys now. I've had a couple drinks. I've done my social thing. Good night. Let's watch TikTok until midnight, but just be alone in the room. And anyway, an accident sort of happened, and one of my friends who was awake at the time, their only thought was, I don't know what to do. I'm going to wake up Lara. And I was awake. I was watching TikTok, but to the outside of the room, I was asleep. And I would love your advice, Kate, here, or like what you kind of see with the situation. Like, I can't believe now, looking back, that I had got myself into a place where I was the one, so much so that when, like, it's a compliment that, I am the mother hen of some situations and organize and all the stuff. But also, that was an example to me, looking back, of what a detriment to myself it kind of was. Like, I feel like I had done all the things for my own personal comfort levels, yet I had not set those boundaries with other people, that the expectation was that I could be woken up to fix a problem that could have been fixed however on their own. So I'd love what you think of the conversation, just to give the Walnut sort of like an example of this sort of thing, the micromanaging, and what kind of place you can kind of get yourself into.
I mean, that's such a good example. I think like my first thought would be like, wow, when did I give birth to these people? Because clearly I'm their mom. Like,
I think
it
you
is
said that to me
astounding.
when I shared with you,
Yeah.
actually. I think you sort of said that.
Yeah, because it's kind of like when you're a mom, you're in for that, right? Even if they're like grown up, like that's part of the territory, and I would get it. But these are like friends, these are like, adults as well. I mean, I think that all I could say from that is it is a moment. It's a moment that really puts it in perspective, right? Which is,
Yeah.
wow, that's where I'm at now. And I think that's when, there's not much you could do in the time, right? Because one thing micromanager or organizers, I feel like it's probably a better way of putting it, like organizers, producers
Mm.
even, is we know how to
Assistance.
spring into action. Like I'm genuinely at all times thinking like, if some shit goes down, I feel like I'll be level-headed, and that is, I mean, genuinely a point of pride that there are certain people who are calm in a crisis and some people who aren't. And it's not to
Yeah.
do with necessarily because of like it's about personalities rather than roles in the group, but it can be hard to sort of
Yeah.
untangle that. And I guess it's that idea of like, if we weren't there, what would they do? They'd work it out, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's about deciding how present you are, or knowing in the future, like coaching, not teaching, maybe going back to what you're
Yeah.
saying, like, you get woken up in the night and someone goes, such and such happened, and you go, okay, so what are you going to do?
Oh. Gives me anxiety for my past self trying
Right.
to say that in the moment. Oh.
And that's it. And the past self couldn't, because it wouldn't have occurred to you, and the patterns, you hadn't even, that was the moment to see it and to
Mm.
think, oh, God, yeah. And it's great when you're in a position to look back and think about it differently. Like when I was managing some team members in production, there was very junior people, and they'd come up and ask me a question, and I'm the authority, I'm supposed to have the answers, and I do. And I would normally micromanage me, just be like, I'll just tell them what to do. But I thought, do you know what? It actually is part of my role at this point, and it's useful to them if I don't just put, this is what you do. I said, okay, well, why don't you have a think? Tell me a few options, what you think we can do. Come back to me and let me know. And I was still a safety net, because she could have come back with three options, and I'm like, well, those are all trash. No. And I could
Yeah.
explain to her the right one. But or I can tell her which one works or whatever. But ultimately, all I was giving was the opportunity of space for learning and for them to think for themselves and still be there to like guide. Because, again, that's where the role is. It's hard to do that with everything, but sometimes it's like, even parents, man, sometimes you got to let the kid fall over once or twice, right? And it's really hard and you don't want them to. So, yeah, a moment like that, sometimes it's just a little pause and, oh, God, okay. So, what do you think we should do? And see what happens.
I love this. I love that. And I think my biggest piece of advice sort of on this, and I'll grab yours in a second, Kate, but for me, Walnut, is also just as I sit and reflect in hindsight how I behaved then versus how I behave now as well, is just giving yourself the opportunity to notice those moments. Like when I was woken up and all the rest of the events occurred, how I was just in total frustration and disappointment with myself and how I had let myself get to that point. So for me, looking back, it's like, remember looking at those moments of the examples of outcomes that, you know, you're not wanting to feel that way, I suppose. And just having those examples for me now, they really greatly affect how I respond and behave in conversations now. Like the statement you said, Kate, like, what are you going to do? Like asking those open questions. I do that now, not all the time, but I don't take it all upon myself to do all the things all the time. And I feel like I'm getting to a stage where I live a relatively like balanced life of give and take, which, well, give and receive is
Yeah.
probably a lighter, fluffier word to use, but um it's starting to feel a lot more like harmonized. It's not necessarily like equal, but there is a ebb and flow to it, which feels very calming. Um so before we sort of wrap this topic up, Kate, I would love to know, do you have an advice for a walnut that is sort of feeling like how we have felt in the past and sometimes still do feel, about being the one, and like you
Yeah.
elaborate
Yeah.
on the words, thank you.
I think it's about where the intention lies, right? Like that resentment that if I don't do it, no one does. I call that like the doormat mentality, right? You're being unfair to yourself. You're letting people walk over you. You're getting what you expect, right? You know, resentful, but also just self-pitying. And then
Yeah.
there's the safety net mentality, which is it's quite an honor to know that in a crisis people think of me and that they feel safe with me and that, you know, I am level-headed in a way that maybe not everyone is, where I am organized. And obviously people like organizer things, that's why they're in the roles they're in, right? It is a talent, it is a gift. And being a safety net's a really lovely thing. It's like this warm blanket. But not everyone needs that all the time, right? They can be above the safety net and you're there if they need you. But it's more like my presence is an encouragement and like I can cheer on from the sidelines a little bit more. So, you know, stepping in when you need to in that positive way rather than feeling like you've got no choice and you're just a doormat on the floor. That would be it, I guess.
I love that, because a doormat is the kind of like how I've described myself feeling a lot in my past as well. And I think what I've come to realize now that I've practiced having walnut conversations as well, and also looking at examples of my past and sort of just basically reflecting, is that people are unaware as well. Like when you actually just shine a light and be like, I actually feel this way, that a lot of my responses have been like confusion that they think that I feel that way, because they're like, how the hell? Because you don't behave like that, like the thoughts in your head, right? You're like, yeah, sure, I'll book it. But then in your head, you're going, oh, for fuck's sake, like, why do I? So really shining a light, and also having that courage to sort of express yourself. And again, a topic we talk about a lot, ask for what you need, setting the boundary for other people so they know how to treat you. All of these things like build into this kind of mentality. But I love the doormat versus the safety net. The safety net one feels like what a real friendship or partnership, any ship should be, right? It's like that, I'm here, I love ya, and it's mutual as well at the same time, which I think is really beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing that, Kate. Walnut, if you have anything to add on this conversation, please jump into the Walnut tree and like tag Kate and I and let us know if you have any stories to share or if you're resonating with this. Because yeah, I feel like I like hearing your stories about times like this, and knowing that I'm not by myself. And Kate, I'm sure you do as well. Right, before token questions and all the things, Miss Kate Bromley, where and what are you working on, but where can the Walnuts find you and find your latest and greatest?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have a big social media presence at all, but you can find me on Instagram at Miss K Bromley, which is probably the best place. And I, as I've mentioned, and Lara's graciously shared about on the podcast a few times, I directed a short documentary which is nearly finished and gearing up to the stage of, getting it to festivals and that kind of thing very soon. I also will be visiting in New Zealand soon, and it's early days, but there are discussions of maybe getting a little screening going in the Wellington area. So that's TBC. But needless to say, if that happens, obviously Laura will be there, and I'll probably extend the invitation out to the Walnut Tree as well to see who might be about and who might be interested.
I love it. I'm excited. I was gonna say it's a little surprise as well, Kate, that Walnut, the next podcast episode with Kate and I will potentially be in person, because we're going on a little trip together, which will be lovely because we haven't seen each other in real life in 3 years. I'm getting all the memories popping up on my phone, so I'm so really, really needed, really excited. So yeah, we'll be in person. Maybe we can do something in the Walnut Tree as well, Kate. That'll be really fun. But anyway, to be TBC and Walnut, I will link Kate's film stuff in the show notes if you want to check it out. It is in the previous episodes as well. But Kate, I love you. You're so delicious. One final question before we end this Walnut Wednesdays episode. What does being a walnut mean to you this week?
This week? That's a
I have
great
to
way of phrasing
preface
it.
because we've asked multiple times now. I think this will be the 7th or 8th time.
Maybe closer to 20. I love it. Um, I think this week it's about, like we always say, like, be who you are, right? So if you're an organizer, if you're a planner, if that's where your strength lies, treat it as a strength, treat it as a superpower, like who you are, what you're talented at, that's a superpower. And use it for good. All right. Don't use it because it's a burden. Don't do it out of resentment or obligation. Like, being a walnut means being yourself and true to yourself and your strengths, but use them as superpowers.
Oh my God. Kate, I love this. I love this.
I feel profound today. I don't know what's happened.
It does feel very profound. And it reminds me of my friend and client Rose, who has a book which I bought many, many years ago. That's how we found each other, which is called Sensitivity is Your Superpower. And she talks all about that sort of thing. So, I just I feel a little bit emotional. That was a really cool description of a walnut. So thank you so much.
Welcome. I love that.
Walnut, again, thank you for being here and for your time. And if you enjoyed this episode, let us know. Do a little screenshot, share a tag, or jump into the walnut tree for more discussions. But just so super grateful, Walnut, that you've been here on my journey and listening to Kate and I talk every 10-ish episodes. But know that you're so appreciated and so seen and so heard. So I love you. I love you a lot, Walnut. And Kate, I just can't wait to touch you in real life and see you really, really soon. But until then, thank you for being on Walnut Wednesday yet again for the 5 bajillionth time. It's always a pleasure, and I love our chats so much. And I just love you. So thank you.
I love you. Thank you for having me again.
Have a happy Walnut Wednesday, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.